This took place in January 2020 when I was 18. I had signed up for DoorDash over the winter break because some friends also did it. I didn't need the money because I was in high school and still living with my parents. It was nice to have something to do. As a kid, a couple of $100 weekly was pretty nice. My first few nights went smoothly. I learned the job after 3 or 4 orders. It was the same kind of work cycle. I started working more during the second week, soon after getting excited about making money for the first time. I tried to make as much money as possible, just like my friends did. We would earn more on days with bad weather. On this day, I decided to do some deliveries on one snowy night. I was FaceTiming one of my buddies for the first hour since we were both on the road, but he stopped along the way and went home around 8 at night. Being on a Saturday, I could stay out as long as possible. I was bored by 10 and took out one more order. I took the package from the store and drove to make the delivery. I drove on a regular road with average houses. The snow had covered everything, making it hard for me to drive and read the house numbers. I slowly moved down the street until I found the correct address. It was a classic 2-story suburban home with Christmas lights still hanging on. I parked my car in front of the house and carried the package after ensuring it had everything. I walked up the driveway, but noticed the front door was open as I approached the porch. It was strange, considering it was raining and snowing that night. I left the package inside the house rather than outside in the cold. I pushed the door slightly open and slipped the bag inside the house. As I took out my phone to take a confirmation photo, I heard a woman yelling from across the house. The woman asked whether I was the delivery man dropping off an order. She sounded like a young lady in her early 20s. I replied yes, adding that I had put the package in the doorway, not expecting any conversation with her. The lady asked me to take the package inside the house. I knew it sounded off to take the package into the house, but I pushed the door inside to see where she was. A long hallway past the entrance led to what I thought was the kitchen. I could see the woman's shadow on the wall as she was presumably standing. I asked her where she wanted me to take the package. There was a long moment before she responded. She brought half of her body around the corner and showed herself at the end of the hallway. She asked me to just take the package to her, gesturing with her hands to let me in. But as she walked past the corner, I noticed the shadow on the wall hadn't moved along with her. It was obviously someone else's shadow. I stood there for some seconds, and I could feel fear rushing through my body. I quietly placed the package down and took a few steps back. I turned and ran out of the house. I quickly stepped into my car and scaredly stepped on the pedal, swiftly driving away. In my front window, the figure of a large man approached and watched as I left. I stopped the car at a nearby gas station to catch my breath and rethink everything. I wondered what the woman and the man were up to when they tried to get me into their house. It was January, and I was renting out a winter cabin. It was a small, bare-bone cabin with only the essentials. It was there for people like me who loved going out fishing or ice fishing. I would usually bring a friend with me, but sometimes I went alone. I never had any problem going alone. I had planned out 3 days in the cabin with no plans in mind except sitting out by the lake and fishing. On the first day when I arrived, I set out my things in the cabin and made myself feel at home. I brewed coffee and relaxed by the fireplace for most of the afternoon. The cabin was only a single room, so everything was in one area. I went to sleep early and woke up at 7 in the morning to go to the lake. It was a 10-minute walk from the cabin down a short forested path entirely covered in snow. I found a good spot when I arrived at the lake, set out my things, and started fishing. I found it stress-relieving to sit down and fish, although some people find it boring. I stayed at the lake for several hours, probably 3 or 4. I parked my things when the snow started to pick up and the wind got heavier. I walked off the lake and back on the path. I immediately noticed a set of footprints in the snow going alongside mine from earlier. They went down the edge of the lake I was at, then turned around before going down the path toward the cabin. I felt uneasy knowing that someone had been here and right behind me, probably watching me. I chose to follow the footprints and see where they would get me. They mostly went along with the footpath, going right back to the cabin. But instead of going back to the cabin, they veered off into the woods. I noticed they continued in a straight line, going into the woods. I returned to the cabin and started warming up by the fireplace, even though I was slightly nervous and confused. I made some food and remained in the cabin all night, keeping the fireplace running and mostly reading, but I heard movement outside about an hour after sunset. There was a very light crunching in the snow and a recognizable pattern of someone walking. I moved over to the window and looked curiously. I instantly saw a figure out in the trees walking toward the path. They wore thick clothing covering every part, making it challenging to figure out any detail of what it looked like. They started walking toward the cabin. I lowered my head, listening to the footsteps as they drew closer until they stopped at the wall. The footsteps came to the window that I was hiding under. The shadow moved around like the person was looking inside. I lifted my head and met a pair of big, white, scary eyes as they stared at me. I jumped in shock and stood a few feet from the window as they tried to lift it open. I ran and grabbed a knife. After several unsuccessful attempts at opening the window, the person ran off. I watched the figure run into the woods, going to where I saw them coming from. I packed up and ran to my car after the incident. I don't know the person who was there, but they knew I was leaving there after seeing me at the lake. I am certain the person had something horrible in mind. I was fortunate to escape unharmed, but I felt that night was close to being my last. Last year, my roommate moved from the house we had rented together for 4 years. We had landed well-paying jobs, but the house we were living in wasn't the best for us. It was only a matter of time before one of us moved out of the house to another, better place. I was able to use all the space after he moved. I decided to stay there for another year or two. Our area was experiencing terrible snowstorms in early December. The company I was working for allowed us to work from home if we felt like doing so. I chose to take the offer. I converted my friend's old bedroom into an office and worked all day. One day I heard a knock from the front door while working. I left the room to check who was at the door. There was a man on the porch in a heavy winter jacket. He didn't look like a worker or delivery guy. He seemed like a regular guy. I opened the door as snow rashes and wind hit me. "How can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled and apologized for interrupting my day. He said his car got stuck in the heavy snow on the other side of the road next to my house. He also said he didn't have a phone and asked if he could use mine. I told him to give me a minute and closed the door. I went to the other side of the house. I looked through the window and saw a small black car stuck in the snow. Now that I was sure the man wasn't lying, I grabbed a jacket, put on some shoes, and returned to the front door. I stood on the porch with the man who used my phone to call his brother. The man handed me the phone after a quick call and then left. I went inside and checked through the window. Seeing the man enter his car, I believed everything was settled. I went back to my office and continued working. At around 7 in the evening, I thought I had done enough for the day and took the night off. It is when I recalled the man with the stuck car. I went to check it, just to make sure he had left since I'd forgotten about the incident. To my surprise, the car was still there. I could see him walking around the car. It had been around 3 hours, and I wondered what he was still doing there. Probably, he was waiting for his brother to get off from work and pick him up. I went to the kitchen, made dinner, and sat on the couch watching television. I stayed up until 9:30, went upstairs to shower, and got ready for bed. I turned on the water and was ready to take the shower. There was a sudden knock on the front door. The knock was loud, harsh, and scary. The banging was so loud that it shook the walls and the entire house. I turned off the water and dressed up quickly. Everything stopped as I left my room and walked down the upstairs hallway. Everything fell silent. I stopped scared, only hearing the wind from outside. I walked slowly downstairs and headed to the front door. I opened it and found no one in the pouch. I looked through the window and saw the car was still stuck in the snow, but the man wasn't inside. I called the police, and they noticed multiple sets of shoe prints in the snow when they arrived. The police took the car's license and found the photo of the man. I realized it was the guy I had helped with the phone earlier. We waited for the man to return, but he didn't. It's disturbing to think about what could have happened that night. Was the man desperately trying to get into my house? Was he running away from someone? I keep asking myself these questions all the time.